I just realized I don't think I tested it whether I can present my screen or not. All right, there we go. Hi, everybody. I don't know if anybody is listening to us right now or if we're online, but if we are slowly working on our connections to get ourselves up and running. So give us a few minutes.
We should be streaming.
Okay, cool.
Carly, Marissa, can you confirm?
Confirming LinkedIn and YouTube is live.
All right, perfect.
Right.
Excellent.
So I'm gonna step around the corner.
All right, perfect.
All right, thanks, Dustin.
So I should be sharing a screen right now. So you should see basically the DL3-2 design. Is that what you're seeing, or are you seeing my whole screen? I think you're seeing my whole screen instead, aren't you?
Yeah, we're seeing the whole screen.
Okay, so then I'll do it this way. Bam.
Hey,
that worked.
there.
See, there we go. So now it looks like we're actually organized.
Oh.
I know, that's amazing.
Fancy.
Fancy schmancy, but we're not going to start for another 4 minutes, right? I think that's how this is supposed to work. That sounds about right, Carly? They can hear us, right?
Yes.
I hope so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Carly, if you're talking to us, you muted. So
Carly,
She said it looks great.
Looks great.
okay, cool, no problem. Well, we got 3 minutes, so we're just still chilling, so it's not that big of a deal, right?
We're live everywhere.
We're live everywhere. Okay. So hi everybody. You may see me here or here. I'm not sure where you're seeing right now. But my name is Denny. We're just gonna wait for about 3 more minutes for people to log in to LinkedIn, YouTube, and the WebEx. And we're here in surprisingly sunny Seattle. Well, east side of Seattle, Bellevue, but surprisingly sunny Seattle. So give yourself a couple minutes, take a bio break, get some coffee, and then we're gonna be starting our show in about 3 minutes. All right. In the meantime, you can always chime in on WebEx, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Tell us where you're based out of. We're going to take a look at it in a couple minutes. Right now, I'm presenting my screen, so I can't actually see it. But as soon as we go ahead and go live, then we'll shift over. We'll do some introductions, and we'll dive right into the details. And then if you have any questions that are related to Delta Lake, Lakehouse, T-Mobile, why we dress the way we dress, things of that nature, by all means, go ahead and chime in your questions here, and we'll do our best to answer them, provided that they're not too gross. That's about it, really. So
Should be a fun day.
should be a fun day. So actually, since you can see, can you see like if there's anybody chiming in on all that?
No one's chiming in. Let's see if
Okay.
anyone's joining.
Okay.
We have 1 attendee so far.
Okay. All right.
Is it still trim back?
Yeah, trim back
Okay. Hey, Trimback, how's it going?
on mobile device.
Okay, cool. Oh, that's true. You know what I can do? I can log in LinkedIn using my LinkedIn here. Hey, did you know that actually with iOS 16 you can actually use your iPhone as your webcam now?
I did not,
Yeah.
but
I was playing around with it yesterday. So.
oh, we're up to 3 now.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
In the WebEx?
Yeah.
So let's see. Let's see what's going on with the. Oh, here we go. We are live here. I'm gonna. There we go. Oh, see.
So you should mute that.
Yeah. How do I move this thing? All right. So for folks that are wondering on LinkedIn, I'm actually logged in there. Hopefully, you're not getting any echo here. Shannon, if you're not seeing anything, you should be able to see a. Oh, hey Jeff, how's it going? You should be able to see the splash screen of D3L2. We're going to turn it off in a second when we start the show. So then you should be able to see us, and we're going to make right now. You probably should see either a splash screen or you can potentially see the room that the 3 of us are in sunny Bellevue, just out of Seattle. So
Okay. So
All right.
I can cover up the screen and not worry about what you're displaying and just put the chat.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Okay, I think we're good to go. So let's go ahead and start. I'll stop showing now. I'll stop sharing, and we should be able to. Are we? I think we do. We start video, I guess.
I think
It's already on.
Yeah, it's already
Yeah.
recording.
Oh no, it's. I'm saying like when we're. So if they want to jump around, say for example, right now, you can see me looking directly at the screen. So I'm saying if you want to go ahead and do that.
Oh, you want
See?
us to start our videos also, and then
I'm saying there we go, right?
I see.
So there we go. Hi, everybody. All right, it is 9 a.m., so I think it's a good time for us to start the show. My name is Denny Lee. This is a fun session with D3L2, or Delta Lake Discussions with Denny Lee. No, I'm not narcissistic. I'm just very love alliteration. That's all this is. And so, anyways, I'm really happy to go ahead and start off this session with some friends here from T-Mobile, but we actually go from much farther in the past. And so we're probably going to dive into that little context first, ask questions around that, and then jump right into it. So I'm going to start directly with my right, which is Robert. Robert, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Robert Thompson. I'm a member of the technical staff at T-Mobile, and I'm a solutions architect. And been here at T-Mobile since 2018. Prior to that, I was at Microsoft with the rest of the fellows in the room.
And my name's Jeff Freeman. I'm also a member of technical staff, solutions architect at T-Mobile. I also spent many years at working for the Big Blue, the other Big Blue, I guess. And worked at a couple other places like GM Cruise. But I've been at T-Mobile for about 2 years now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I met Denny at Microsoft Advertising in like 2000. Before it was called Microsoft Advertising, it was called Ad Center, and that was like 2007.
I think so, yeah.
And-
Before it was even called Bing, for that matter.
Yeah.
By the way, it looks like with LinkedIn, we're only showing the main screen. So, hey, Carly, I'm just curious. Sorry to drag you in from a technical. Can we jump around between the different video screens, or are we only able to use the main screen? Do you know?
I think that's the product of the webinar.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, I do not know that answer to that question. Marisa, would you know?
I think that's gonna be Dustin.
Oh, gotcha. All right.
Interestingly,
I'll work on that.
Thank you, Dustin. All right, perfect.
there you go. Well, at least we see the full main screen on LinkedIn now.
Yeah. So that's good. At least we got that part figured out. No, it was just more like we also had we could theoretically jump back and forth. That was the context. That's all. So, all right. So, anyways, you were busy talking about. Okay, so yeah, we'll look at the screen for now like this. You were busy talking about your back in our days before it was even called Bing Ad Center days.
Yes. Wow. So that's way back in the day. So I was working for a guy named Sasha Berger, who was one of the original writers of analysis services, and you were helping to get the Ad Center's BI on track. It was challenged, but about the same time I met Robert, so that was 2010.
Yeah.
You had gone off and were doing other things. You were working with
He was at SQL Cat.
yeah, you were on SQL Cat.
That's right. Yeah. SQL Customer Advisory Team.
Yes.
But then don't forget, remember, I was first in Bing with you guys, right? And then I ran off to SQL Cat because we were busy trying to build Cosmos at the time.
Yeah.
And I was going, no. We can solve everything with SQL Server. Everything, all data problems required that is a nail, and all of them required the hammer of SQL Server. That was where I was coming from. Yeah.
My, how times have changed.
Yeah. Oh boy, they changed it. Absolutely, yes.
But yeah, so you were a SQL Cat, and
Yeah.
you came to me and said, hey, we've got this new thing called Project Durango, which is the early versions of Tabular, and I want you to test it. Here's an insane server. Like it was
Had like 256 cores and
2 terabytes of
memory. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, "Can you break this?"
Yes.
And it took us 30 minutes.
No, I actually forgot. Were you guys running SQL Server or analysis service at the time when you broke it?
Analysis services.
Okay.
Yeah.
Analysis services on that huge server.
Yeah. Okay.
And the codenamed Durango.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
tabular model.
but I don't think I actually gave you the SSDs on that particular server either, right? I think that was just still spin disks, I think.
Ooh,
I'm
that's
trying to remember because I just remember I don't remember what the heck we put in Durango on that one. It's too long ago now.
I don't remember if it had SSDs or spinners.
Yeah. But anyways, the reason we're bringing up SSD and spinners is because for any of you folks who are remotely interested in analysis services, basically it was very good at producing a heck of a lot of random IO. And so the problem with random IOPS was basically if you had spin disks, it would basically make the ability for you to query the data off the disk slow to a massive crawl. Basically, that's what it boiled down to. And so the whole context was that could we go ahead and have something like analysis services, which was inherently very, very random IOPS and would basically saturate memory, saturate the bus, saturate the CPU. Could it actually survive? And basically, these gentlemen proved that no, and doesn't make sense.
Well, in your defense, we were working on the KPI cube at that time, which was the second largest one in the world, second only to the Yahoo cube, and we just loaded that into the tabular model, and it went boom.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And middle left when we built the Yahoo cube, that was for context, folks. It was a 24 terabyte analysis service cube back in I want to say 2010.
Yeah.
That source was 2 petabytes of I want to say 4,000 node Hadoop server at the time. It was like one of the larger or largest Hadoop clusters in the world.
No, it wasn't Hadoop at that point. That was Cosmos.
No. No, I'm saying the Yahoo cube.
Oh,
Yeah.
The
Yahoo cube
was
okay.
Yeah. That's not yours.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. So the Yahoo cube and then we had the most expensive staging server in the world because it was an Oracle rack server. I didn't design that one, don't worry. But and by the way, there is actually a point to us providing the context of this history. Basically, like I think the whole reason we're starting off like this is we want to give you everybody who's listening here some context that we come from a very data warehousing BI background, and so we've done this for a while. So for example, Robert, there's a question from Faraz on excuse me, from LinkedIn. And so he's wondering, like, where did you graduate from? What was your background? Obviously, we know you're a data warehousing expert, but from your perspective, what did you go to school for? Like, where did you graduate?
I went to school for computer science at Louisiana Tech.
Sweet.
A long time ago.
Okay, cool. And then how about you?
I'm currently going to UW Bothell.
Oh, sweet. But it's good because you've gotten very super interesting background. So why don't you talk a little bit about your background?
When I got out of the Army in '98, I was qualified to clean toilets or be a cop. And I didn't want to do either. So I made a list of things that I like to do. And like top of that list was cooking and computers. And it turns out that cooking is long hours and pays terribly, and computers is kind of the opposite. So, I started taking classes in Portland, but I got a job as enterprise technical support at Web Trends that paid as much as I ever thought I would make. And so I dropped out of school and learned enough SQL Server that I got a job as a developer at a startup called Complete. And then while I was there, they wanted to do OLAP stuff, so I taught myself analysis services well enough that when I moved to Seattle and interviewed with Microsoft, Sasha was willing to give me a job. And from there, just there's never a limit to things that you can learn while you're doing it on your own. So
the interesting part is neither one of us ever graduated. So
there you go.
We were both dropouts.
No.
Self-taught.
Okay, so I'm in the same boat actually. My background is actually, Asian parents, if you can't tell I'm Asian. I was supposed to be a doctor, right? So that was my parents had it, especially my mom. She had already planned out, you're going to be a doctor and you're going to go. And so it was all planned out. So I went to McGill for pre-med basically. Yeah, and so I did graduate pre-med. That's true, but then end up going directly to Microsoft from there and working on web and databases. So basically, yeah, and I never finished my biostats masters, so it's okay. And we all come from various different backgrounds. But What's interesting, and so we've answered the question for Faraz from LinkedIn here, is that we all come from very different backgrounds, but we came into what ultimately is here in Seattle and end up working a lot on data warehousing and BI.
Yeah.
And so let's shift the gears a little bit because we'll actually come back to this part of it actually in terms of the migration stories, because right now, remember the theme of today's session is about the migration to data lakehouse via Delta Lake. So why don't we talk about the T-Mobile story from Data Science NA, Data Science Analytics, excuse me, in terms of, it was first with you, Robert, because you're the one who sort of got the spark going.
I started this.
How did this all start?
Well, when I started here, we were trying to increase the build rate of T-Mobile's network. They had just purchased a lot of spectrum and they wanted to build a big 5G network. And so we started trying to solve problems, mostly. You know, it came out of iteration. We took and there was someone that had a build plan on a spreadsheet, and I was like, well, that should be done in a computer, and started that way. So let's put this in a table and see if we can figure out how to automate this. And the more things that I brought into this central location, it was an MPP that we had built and just brought data from all different systems. It became an integration point and just took off from there. And then the more people that used it, the more it got bogged down. And then one day I called Jeff and said, hey, you want a job? You remember that time that we built this separated compute and storage thing? We should do that again. And that'll take us back to a little history. We actually built a separated compute and storage back in 2010 using analysis services.
That's right. Yeah. So cool. So you started off with that process where you joined T-Mobile, and then you decide for some reason that you tolerated Jeff enough to go ahead and bring it back after the fun times building these analysis services cubes. So why don't you talk a little bit about what was the environment that you were running into? Like, what was the systems that you actually had to face?
So there was Oracle, there was SAP, there was SQL Server, there's Postgres, flat files. It was everything, and you can throw a dart at a board with a system, and you will hit something that we had to pull data from. And integrating that data was a long process, right? So modeling it all, we didn't have time for. So it was just more like bring it all to one place and let the business users figure out how to tie it together.
Right.
And then harvest that logic and bring it back into the fold and say, okay, these are the business rules. Comes from the business. So that's where we started.
Okay, so basically you started with a bunch of databases.
Yeah.
And then you basically had a bunch of business rules, and basically between the databases and the different sources that you actually had to figure out how to combine together, plus all these different business rules, then you basically had to figure out how to sort of like merge, do ETL, I guess, on this file.
Yeah,
So-
on this pile.
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically, the important thing to understand is that we are not the data warehousing team for all of T-Mobile or even just for all of procurement. We are a data science and analytics org. And essentially our role is to fill in the gaps for stuff that has not already been properly data warehoused. So there is an official data warehouse where all of this stuff is supposed to be integrated, but we all know that data warehousing is an intensive effort. It takes a lot of time to model things properly and get things built properly, and there's never enough resources that are assigned. So the original impetus for our team was, how do we build reports off these systems that should be in the data warehouse but aren't? And the first thing that has to happen is you have to pull all the data into one place. And no other teams had done that on the procurement side, so that systems that hadn't been properly modeled into the data warehouse, people could start working with. So when Robert did that and started pulling all this data in, and then was building the ETL for it so that it would implement this one particular set of business rules, this was the first time that a lot of people had seen that all of this data in one place. And so they came in and started building their own reports off of this centralized location. And there was a ton of business value in people just being able to access a location where they could access all of the data. And even if it's not properly modeled for warehousing, build their own reports. And when people did that, we got a lot of business value off of them doing the modeling for us, essentially. It's not properly modeled.
Right.
It's not fully where we would put it into a business warehouse, but we're able to take their business logic and then identify the important parts and then model those pieces.
Okay, got it.
Right?
Right.
So we've kind of become a staging warehouse
Okay,
for stuff that has not yet made it into the enterprise data warehouse.
gotcha.
But what this really highlighted for a lot of people across the business is the value of having access to all of this data so that you can figure it out for yourself and before it's in the data warehouse. And so the centralized MPP server that Robert had built and had pulled all this data into, people clamored and got access to it. But now they build their own stuff and their business depends on the stuff that they're building. It's blocking the operational processes that Robert has built. And we have workload contention. And it's impossible, we all know this, it's impossible to linearly scale up. Right? So even though this is an MPP cluster, it's still a single cluster.
Yeah.
And it's not like you can just continue to scale this cluster infinitely because it's not that sort of system. So that's where he brought me in, which was how do we convert this into something that's going to scale out instead of scale up.
Okay, so this goes back to so to provide some context for everybody, this is back in what, 2014?
2010 is when we built OLAP on.
No, I'm talking this started.
I started here in 2018,
2018,
so I brought him in 2020.
Okay, all right, so this is 2020, but understand the context is, okay, basically between when we had done the analysis services stuff back in 2010
Yeah.
and to where we are talking in terms of the timeline, in terms of 2020, right now it's accepted that we're scaling out for most of our problems.
Yeah.
But especially for enterprises, especially even at 2020, and this happened during that decade of between 2010 and 2020, a lot of enterprises were like, no, we can scale up all of our problems. We can just toss more memory. There's no issues with NUMA memory management at all. I can go on for hours and you don't want me to. About cross bridges between memory cards. So that way, in terms of that's why I would actually slow down query performance because they would actually have to hit the cross bridge. Okay. I could go on for hours about disk utilization, spin disks, rotations, random IOPS versus serial IOPS.
Got it.
Thank you. Sorry. So, but the context is basically at the time, especially enterprises, and T-Mobile's no different here. The context is like we could scale up. A problem, we could just throw more hardware at the problem, not understanding that basically we're hitting. And the reason I talk about the memory in physics, not just because I'm an ardent geek, though that's true, is the part of the reason I'm bringing this up is because literally is to emphasize the point that we were literally hitting the laws of the wall of physics at this time. Like literally, we could not physically go any faster than what the hardware could possibly provide.
That's true. And you know, the way that you solve that is you distribute it out.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
and that's how we got to where we are at. So
Right.
Spark does a great job of that, and we hitched our horse to that wagon.
Perfect. So let's segue right into that. So for most of everybody who's listening to this particular session, especially because it's a Delta Lake session, we're pretty sure they understand Spark and they're pretty happy with Spark. But why don't you paint the picture in terms of what was the migration path in order to get people who are typically coming from that EDW, SMP type systems to saying that actually we think it makes sense to go ahead and use to, number one, scale out, and number two, scale out on Spark. And at the time that you're scaling on Spark, it was not it wasn't, well, I guess by 2020 it was seen as as de facto, but still, it was still relatively fresh for a lot of enterprises.
Well, so as Jeff alluded to earlier, we're in a data science org, right? So most of the people that we interacted with were already clamoring to get their hands on Spark. And when we decided to make this jump, there was no pushback for us. We were just like, hey, we're going to move this stuff to Spark. All of our transformation logic will be in Spark, and we're going to try to figure out a way to make this a generic system that you can just do it with a few lines of metadata.
Well, I mean, there was some pushback. The biggest pushback that we had was end users who thought, I don't want to learn a new tool set in order to consume data, right? So we had particularly like business analysts and report builders who were used to using Excel or SQL Server or Power BI, and they would say, I'm not going to be like, am I going to be able to consume this data from your Lakehouse? Am I going to be able to, am I going to have to learn a whole new set of technologies?
Right.
And so a big piece for us was making sure that whatever it was we were going to migrate would be compatible with their existing tool sets. So, as we were migrating from a single centralized location to Lakehouse, we went to real pains to make sure that the stuff that we had in the Lakehouse mirrored what we had in this centralized data warehouse for people who had not yet migrated, so that they could use the same tool set and get the same results. And that was the only piece of pushback that I would say was significant.
Once we figured out that we could do pass-through authentication with a serverless endpoint, that became a non-issue though. Like it, and that was one of the keys to our design, was we wanted to lock our data down at the data.
Right.
So we put ACLs on the Delta tables themselves that, you know, if you have access, you have access. If you don't, you don't.
Right.
And so that's, once we had passed through authentication on our serverless endpoint, we were good to go, and we just started going to town.
So the actual impetus for us moving in the first place was we had a particular report.
Okay.
So we called it pick plan priority, or priority pick plan. I don't know.
Something.
It's P3.
Okay.
It was 3 P words.
Yeah.
And basically what it was doing is it was doing a linear optimization over available build sites in order to allocate inventory in order to build our network. So
Okay. Sorry. Just to make sure, because I've hung out with you enough, I actually sort of understood what you said, but for our audience, they might not understand.
Yeah,
They might
yeah.
explain that context.
let me unpack this.
Yeah,
So,
please. Thank you.
So the initial project that Robert built, where he integrated all of this stuff into a centralized location, was to how do we accelerate the pace at which T-Mobile is building towers.
Okay.
So T-Mobile had made a commitment that they were going to, instead of building, like they previously mostly leased their tower space, and now we build and own our tower space.
Okay.
And so in order to change from those models, they had to go from building like 100 towers a month to building 1,500 towers a week.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So a huge increase. So that comes with tons of problems in inventory and supply chain, but also the tower sites themselves have an incredible list of things that have to happen in order to build a cell tower. You have to have leases and permits and like landholder agreements, and it's a huge checklist that has to happen.
And so just to clarify your point, all of that information, like the checklist that you're talking about, is part of that data set that's going to the centralized location.
Yes.
None of,
Yeah.
all of those checkboxes,
Right.
well, not all of them, but they're like, so here's a system that has some of the checkboxes, here's a system that has some of the checkboxes, here's a system that has some of the checkboxes, here's a system. So there was no one system with all the checkboxes.
Right.
So the system that Robert built is the first place at T-Mobile where all of those systems all that data lived in the same place.
Got it. Okay.
Nobody had done that before.
Yeah.
That's freaky. So in other words, prior to this, sorry to interrupt, but prior to this, what you're telling me is that if I wanted to go ahead and build a tower, I'd actually have to go to multiple systems, hope the heck there was a reconciliation process that the same ID actually meant the same thing, and it wasn't by accident. Actually, you're referring to an ID that's in a completely different state, right? That you could actually have some form of reconciliation. It's like, oh, that ID, that document that for the permit is associated with that particular supply chain. You actually had to go to multiple different systems, hope the heck those that the data definition was correct. And so what you did was to start that process and say, hey, let's normalize, centralize, so that way we can actually understand it, because we're about to jump from 100 to 100 was it? Sorry,
100 a month to 1,500.
right? 100 a month to 1,500 a week, which is just a tiny bit of a change.
Yes.
So once all of that data was in the same place and he started building this report is available a lot faster. It's a lot more accurate. And all of a sudden we're able to increase velocity of build.
Right.
And all these other business users were like, oh, there's a ton of value in having this data all in the same place. So they all came to access it. And that's where we got our workload contention.
Gotcha.
But this report is still super key.
Right.
But it's constantly getting blocked by people who have access and are blocking those processes.
Right.
So the very first thing that he had me do when he brought me on is extract that into basically a Lakehouse paradigm where we were, all of the data was already being staged in the data lake.
Okay.
So as it's being loaded into our centralized system, it was already being staged in the data lake. So I built Delta tables off of what was in the data lake and then built a Spark process that would do the ETL and spit out the report.
Got it.
And Ben was like, we should do this for everything. Like what? Like it's cheaper, it's faster, it doesn't have any workload contention. All this data that I'm currently using to build is the data that other people are currently trying to access from the centralized location.
Right.
And they can access it from the data lake and not have any of those problems.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's shift over to that now. Okay, talking about the data lake. So before we even talk about Delta, let's talk about Spark and data lake. So in other words, you initially had built the system as data lake, a bunch of Parquet files, or did you jump right into Delta right away? I'm just curious.
No, it was staged as Parquet.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
every extraction saved as Parquet and then loaded
Gotcha.
from the Parquet itself.
So cool. So what were some of the prior to shifting over to Delta? What were some of the issues? Because right now, remember from a context for everybody that's listening, the context is that right now, sure, we've ended up with a lake house, but you don't just jump directly to a lake house, right? At least in this case, there was a journey.
Yes.
Right? There absolutely was a journey. Now, obviously, we're hoping anybody that's listening to us that you learn from this, so that way you can jump directly to the lake house. But so why don't we talk about like that process? Okay, so you've got a bunch of databases. You've managed to centralize, normalize. So now there's a reconciliation process. Everybody's like going, oh, cool, I can actually understand my data. Perfect. So now you're getting these larger and larger data lakes with more and more Parquet files. More and more people want to query the stuff. You got Spark, and this time you have Spark 2 or Spark even 1, not Spark 3, definitely not Spark 3 at the time.
No, this is Spark.
Probably 2.2, 2.3?
No, this is like 2020, Denny. So I mean, I think it was 3.1. I think it was 3.0.
Okay,
it was
okay.
2.8 or 3.0.
Okay. 2.4 or 3.0.
I think you were around 2.1.
Okay.
Does that
Anyways,
matter?
the only reason I was bringing it through is because it's Spark 3.x has the really cool AQE, adaptive query execution, and so it actually is even it can handle skews, which is really nice.
I think when I did P3, I think we were on Databricks runtime 7.4.
Okay. So that's 2 something. I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have to look at the DBR notes. But that's not that's not the important part here right now. Okay?
Not the important part.
Not the important part. Okay, so let's talk about, but basically it was Spark with a bunch of Parquet tables that you were basically dealing with at this time.
Mhm.
So if you're talking about Spark with a bunch of Parquet tables at the time, what were some of the, like, ultimately, just like Jeff, you called out, like, you were able to avoid some of the contention issues, but that's because, but what were the issues that you ran into as you were transitioning to this Spark and data lake with Parquet?
What were some of the problems? Hours in the day.
Okay.
That was the first one.
There's only so much coffee we can provide here.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We couldn't get it done fast enough. That was probably the biggest problem. Everyone was clamoring for us to be done.
Okay.
And it was some long hours. I know when we rewrote the system originally, I think I just kind of shut off Slack for like a week and just went to town.
Well, I mean, when we did the P3, when
Yeah.
we did the pick plan priority,
Yeah.
the biggest hurdle that we had there was we didn't have people who knew Spark,
Okay, all right.
right? It was basically me doing a lot of the translation.
Yeah.
But also at that point, most of the data engineering that we had in place was custom.
Okay.
Most of the pipelines that we're extracting from systems and dropping it into Parquet, most of those were custom pipelines written specifically for this system. And here's a list of the tables, and each one has its own activity and
So out of curiosity, was it like, without diving into the Uber details, just because we'll go on too long, was it like basically a lot of business logic that was locked into stored procedures or things of that nature as well? So that was hard to, or I'm just curious, what was the context by which the business logic for those systems?
Views upon views upon views upon views.
Oh dear. Okay, got it. Okay. All right. So basically abstractions upon abstractions,
Yeah.
and so then trying to even ascertain what the end result was actually quite difficult at times.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the first things we did on that pilot program was disentangle all of the views that we were consuming from
Okay.
and rebuild them in Spark.
Okay.
And that allowed us to considerably streamline and break it and rebuild things. But the key lesson that we took from that is that as we mapped out what our migration was going to be from the existing system to our current Lakehouse is what Robert was saying earlier. We resolved that any of the things that we were going to build would be as generic as possible.
Okay. Got it.
So
Basically, you're modularizing things so that way they could be reused again and again.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
so one of the things I often talk about, I don't get deep enough into it, and so I really should do another session just on this concept is that the whole concept of data engineering, and this is what you guys are doing, is actually getting at the time when we started data engineering, especially back in the day, data engineering, software engineering often had nothing to do with each other, right?
Yeah.
Basically, in terms of this idea of modularizing, this idea of processes, the idea of actually testing the code base that we created basically didn't exist. And so as we get closer to these Lakehouse paradigms, an important aspect of this is not just about this idea that, I'm doing data engineering, a la SQL or Spark SQL or whatever. I'm actually following software engineering paradigms to do such a thing. And I'm just curious from your perspective, were you guys, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's just more like, I was curious, are you using typically Spark SQL, Python, Scala? Just curious.
Ooh, yes.
So
Python and Spark SQL. Yeah.
yeah, mostly Python and Spark SQL. So the big piece that actually 1 second. So Dustin is saying that if we unmute ourselves, I think that it will start following. Oh no, he says don't unmute ourselves. So the first thing that we did is build bronze and silver tables.
Okay.
Using the Lakehouse paradigm.
The medallion architecture. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where we would mirror the tables from the source system and then just maintain them as Delta tables.
Okay.
And then build the gold tables off of those.
Right.
And the notebook that we wrote, so we wrote a generic notebook to maintain the bronze and silver tables, and that's almost all Python.
Okay.
The notebooks that we wrote, so we wrote a generic wrapper to go around any of the gold tables. And those are, so the generic wrapper is in Python, and then the actual transformations that happen are in Spark SQL.
Gotcha.
In order to make it as easy as possible for people to move from the SQL world into the Spark world.
Right.
The only bits of Scala that we use are the parallelizing notebook.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
So we do stuff, a lot of our maintenance jobs use that
Okay.
in order to scale out.
Okay, cool. Oh, so we have a question here from LinkedIn, that I figured we didn't answer. What technologies, we sort of alluded to it, but maybe being a little bit more specific without any confidential, obviously, stuff, but what technologies did you guys use prior to this migration to a data lakehouse?
We used Azure Data Warehouse.
Okay,
So I had a history with Parallel Data Warehouse before, or PDW,
PDW, yes,
before it was ADW.
that's right.
And so when I got here, I cranked one of those up, and that's what I used.
Gotcha. Okay, and then but the source systems themselves were very variety.
Yeah, everything.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my history with PDW, he was writing a competing product at Microsoft, SQL Stripe.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I forgot about that. Oh wow!
I
I
still
didn't
think
realize.
it's fantastic.
So I guess technically, I was against you too because when it was SQL Cat, the PDW Cat team reported to me. Actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were taking you out. Okay, got it.
Yes, you are. Hey,
Oh, sorry.
never mind. Yeah. I still think we have the superior product.
Let's see. Okay, we got a bunch of questions. Okay, we got a YouTube question for Greg. So I'm guessing it's Greg Kramer, our old buddy here. So y'all up your game. What is being demanded of old biz Excel folk to play with Delta, more SQL, more Python? So basically, I think the context is more about like because of your analysts, right? Which were using Excel and SQL, things of that nature. How did they shift over to be able to utilize Spark in this case? Like, I mean, great that you talk about the endpoints and the authentication. That covers a lot of the issues. But then the ideas from a usability UX perspective, what did it take to basically transition the analysts that were using those reports that were so used to using Power BI, Excel, and SQL Server for their queries?
So, I mean, the serverless endpoint has been key to that. So being able to just connect their reports to the serverless endpoint, they didn't know any difference.
Mhm.
So they don't know. So we've put our Delta tables in created views that will just look like SQL tables.
Right.
So they don't know any different.
That's awesome. Okay, so basically, from the standpoint of the end user, there was really no difference for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
The query, the
Slight changes to the SQL query, possibly. Yeah.
slight changes in the syntax.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Cool.
The thing that's been, so we've been putting on regular training
Yeah.
sessions.
Okay. Cool.
So we have regular training sessions that are quarterly, and then we have weekly office hours, and where we help people who are making those transitions.
Okay.
But the thing that's been driving people to adopt the Spark endpoints that we provide is the actual business results that they see. They've seen all the benefits of I know that my report's always going to succeed because I don't have to worry about workload contention. They've seen that they get it's really easy for them to share their data with other teams because they don't have to go to a SQL Server administrator in order to open a firewall port or something along those lines. They just add somebody to an Active Directory group that's already been set on this container, and off they go.
Gotcha.
So the biggest thing that's been driving people to Spark is just they see the business value.
Gotcha.
Another thing that we did early on was we instituted DevOps.
Okay.
And with that, we gave guardrails. And so a lot of the questions that we see in our office hours are, I have this pull request out, and can you guys review it and tell me what I did wrong and give me suggestions? And we give, feedback that's constructive and help them in, learn what they did wrong, or wrong's the wrong term, what they can do better.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's helped a lot. Like, we're improving I like to call it, we're turning our customers into our employees.
So
I like that quote.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. I
Remember-
might steal that one, by the way. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
remember, like, you know, the original impetus for the system was, oh, we've centralized all this data and now people can come access it and figure out stuff on their own.
Right.
And we can identify the important parts and there's a term we've been using called harvest to core. We'll take the important parts and we'll properly model them and then expose them back out to customers.
Sure.
Right. But because we got everybody onboarded to our DevOps, and now when they go to like create a new report, it comes across our desk, or it comes across the desk of our data engineering team, and who we've been training up on data modeling concepts.
Right.
So these business analysts will write a report and will say, you know that this already exists as a slice of this other, you should use
Right.
this other base table, or you know, here's what you're trying to do is a slowly changing dimension, and here's how to do it, right? So it's become a really good tool for us to spread best practices.
Awesome. Okay. So we've got a bunch of questions, but I did want to steer slightly because to Delta Lake and the Lakehouse concept, because
Okay.
because right now you for anybody that's listening right now, you'll notice that we're still, even though we're talking about Lakehouse, even though we're talking about Delta Lake and talking about Spark, you notice that we're actually very rarely using data warehousing terms here. Okay, like type 2 slowly changing dimensions. In other words, we're not necessarily using, we're not using data warehousing technology, but we're certainly using their techniques. And we're using some of the, even, and often their terminology, okay, which is a core context of the Lakehouse. So before we dive finally into the Lakehouse aspect, let's stop off and talk about Delta Lake. So why Delta Lake though? Like, why, in order for you to create these systems, what was it about Delta Lake in your case that was a fundamental part of why that was required for your Lakehouse?
It was cost.
Okay.
You know, we work in a procurement division, so cost is important.
Okay.
And there are other things out there that cost a lot that do a very similar thing. And we steered away from that because we're smart.
So the context I'd love to dive into. It's like, is it because, was there an inherent need for example, transactional reliability, or was it schema evolution? Like, were there any
Schema evolution was huge.
Okay.
Schema evolution was definitely a big factor. We talked about that early on, and we even tested it a few times. You know, what does the Delta table do if a new column comes in or whatever? And it worked marvelous. It worked perfect. So we were just like, yep, this is the way.
So this was still a glimmer in the eye, I believe, but one of the early things that we were told was about, you know, the change data feed.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And so one of the key things that we had, I mean, actually one of the things that Robert had told me about was his early efforts to try to take these systems that hadn't been built for identifying deltas
Okay.
and figure out a way to cleanly and cheaply identify changes so that we could then broadcast that out to other people, whether through Kafka or some other method.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we heard about change data feed.
Yeah.
And we're like, that's exactly what we need.
Yeah.
That is literally exactly what we've been talking about designing, and somebody else has already done it for us.
Yeah.
And so it makes it possible for other systems to, even these upstream systems that don't have change data capture enabled, it makes it possible for other consumers to get all those benefits. So that was a huge one for us.
Okay.
Yeah. Forgot about that, but yeah.
I'm just curious.
Before my last job at Microsoft was working for Azure Data Lake Analytics.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that actually too.
And
Yeah.
but that was where I really first was exposed to the idea of the infinite scale out of a data lake, right? And like you have no workload contention, you have total workload isolation, and you can have lots and lots of people working on the same data at the same time. And the job that I was doing there was actually working on changing Microsoft's internal data format so that it would be rewritable, right? So it was doing journaling, right?
That's right. Yeah,
And
okay, yeah.
and so I was already familiar with this idea, and I was already familiar with the idea of Delta Lake. Bilal had introduced it to me. So,
Yeah, Bilal.
yeah.
So yes, he's an old friend of ours from our ad center days that we're all friends of. So hopefully, Bilal, if you're actually listening to us, hi.
Hey, Bilal. So we already had that context about the benefits of Delta Lake. The other big piece was that because it's open source, and because of the way it interacts with Spark and other systems, we weren't worried about vendor lock-in in any sort of way.
Yeah, the
Right.
vendor lock-in was huge. We have a question on here that says, if you had to redesign the whole thing today, would you do it the same way? And the answer is yes. I would continue doing the iterations and just the way we did. So yeah.
There are changes that I think we would do when it comes to the data engineering side of it. Like, so we're using Azure Data Factory.
Yeah.
And Azure Data Factory has a lot of good things going for it.
Okay.
One of my least favorite is its lack of modularity. Like it has a limited depth that you can go with things like you can't embed a for loop inside a for loop. There's a lot of things that you can't do.
Right.
Because it's built on logic apps.
That's right.
I think that one of the things that we would probably do is we would use a more modular system, something like maybe DBT. We might look at using something like Fivetran.
Right.
But
Or Airbyte or something like that.
I was on the DWC team for a little bit. We would not write our own.
Yeah. But so there are other, like if we were truly starting from scratch,
Right.
U1 F96B, then we would probably change some of the tooling that we used, but the overall architecture would stay the same.
Gotcha. That's actually really cool. So all right. So now this journey that you've went through, we've got about like maybe 10 minutes left. So
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow.
Time flies.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. We've migrated from these multiple systems in which, again, this part I didn't know, which is pretty cool. The fact that from a procurement perspective, you had these different source systems, you centralized it. We're able to make use of Spark, able to make use of Delta Lake. So now you actually have a Lakehouse. And just like you had sort of mentioned, but that I want to dig in a little bit for the audience here. People started realizing that they can not just do for this your P3 project, but for other systems. And so I'm just curious, like, are you seeing this paradigm of Lakehouse then start being, like you say, absorbed or understood by the other teams within T-Mobile or any of the folks that you're currently working with? Because you noted the monthly sessions, the office hours, things like that. I'm just curious that transition, like how like fast, slow, migration problems, concepts, like things that you think that people should know as they're doing these type of migrations, basically.
It's going about as fast as our staff can handle. So there's interest. We get probably an email a month from another team reaching out, wanting to see what we've done and how they can understand what we've done and maybe use it for what they're working on.
Okay.
So yeah, it's going about as fast as our team can handle.
Okay.
Maybe a little faster than our team can handle it sometimes, but
Right.
yeah, it's going great. I feel like that we're doing all that we can do.
As far as like how it is the idea is catching on across the enterprise. There are other teams inside T-Mobile that we've been working with to advance or promote the idea, or that have already like come to it on their own.
Mhm.
So there's a team called Razor that does they're focused on the consumer side of the business.
Sure.
So we're all on the procurement, which is the the network side, and
Right.
Razor is basically the customer care. They're the team that's doing what we do on the customer care side.
Okay,
So
got it.
they're making it possible for people to
Yeah.
integrate data that hasn't been warehoused properly and modeled and warehoused properly yet.
Got it.
And they are on a very much similar parallel track to us.
Okay.
There are still, T-Mobile is a big company, and there are still lots of different schools of thought about how, what the overall data architecture landscape should look like. And
Which is understandable. I mean,
Yeah.
any enterprise is always going to have that. Yeah.
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 We're still the underdog,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
but the results really speak for themselves.
Right.
We have a team of 13 right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a team of 13, and we're managing thousands of tables.
Okay.
Like,
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's getting close to 2,000 now.
Okay.
it's over 2,000.
Is it over 2,000?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah,
there you go.
I used to remember when back in the SQL Server days when we talked about like the standpoint of DBA, but they would do like the DBA to table ratio. Like, and it was like, okay, once you go past 1 to 50 or something like that, or then basically you were hosed or something. I forgot. I mean, this is going back such a long time ago, so I'm forgetting what the ratio number was. And oh no, I think 1 to 50 was a rock star. Like, it's like, oh my goodness, how could you handle that? That type of thing. So the idea that the 13 of you are actually handling this, what is obviously complex data in 2,000 different tables, 2,000 plus tables. That's
Yeah.
pretty stinkingly good.
Yeah. So, like I said, those results seem to speak for themselves, and the fact that people are able to, the bottleneck to more people getting access to the integrated data that Robert had brought together for that first time used to be there's only so many resources on this centralized location,
Right.
and that's no longer a bottleneck,
Right.
at all.
Gotcha.
So,
No, that's really cool. Perfect. Well, okay. I figured most of the questions have been answered. So why don't we just wrap it up? I mean, any last thoughts, concepts, call outs that you'd like to go ahead for anybody who's listening here?
Jeff. Call him out. He's the,
We'll call you out, but
yeah,
no,
he-
but like
he,
it's like, I mean, here's it's sort of in the theme of this idea that what would you change, right? Like you've went through this journey from a bunch of databases, and we're all data warehousing guys, right? And we've shifted over to a Lakehouse. And so I'm just saying, like, for anybody that is in the same shoes as you, like who actually is in another company where you also have, again, prototypical of enterprises where there's multiple different, it's a very heterogeneous environment, lots of different data systems. Like, what's some advice that you can provide in terms of doing that particular transition?
hire well.
Okay, all right. That's always a good one. Yes, all right. Hiring well, I will agree with that fully.
so
My boss at the time said, "Can we clone you?" And I said, "Yeah, hold on."
Okay, so while we can clone Delta tables, that's the channel for Delta cloning. No, we cannot clone. Oh, by the way, sorry. We can clone obviously Delta tables within Databricks. I just yesterday created the issue because I forgot to create it 2 months ago. So I was called out about this. So my bad to in GitHub. Yes, we are absolutely planning to open source Delta clones for everybody. So yes, it was purely I forgot to add it. Okay, so I want to call that. I'm calling myself out here, okay? So no more. So, but yes, so obviously so while we can clone Delta tables, we can't clone people. So
Yeah.
yes, so but to continue your thoughts, sorry, my fault.
So I actually want to go back to what I assume that's ULF 9B8. had asked,
Okay,
about like things that we would change, observability capabilities and stuff like that.
right, right.
There are systems today that do much better jobs of lineage tracking and making it data discoverable and understandable for consumers. I think that's one of the big things that we would try to build in at a lower level from the very beginning. But the key piece of advice that I would give in general to anybody who is going to start either migrating a system or start building it from scratch is to keep in mind what you had said about the chasm that you often see between programming best practices and data engineering practices, which is data engineering is programming, and we should treat it as such.
Yeah.
You should check your code into source control. You should build tests. You should modularize as much as possible. If you find yourself doing the same thing every time you have a new table, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
You should build stuff in components in such a way that when you decide to add an observability module, you just add it in one place and it shows up everywhere.
Right.
Right. So that's the number one thing that I would tell anybody who's going to start migrating or building from scratch is start off with that programming mindset.
Cool.
We built a testing framework for SQL.
There you
So
go.
just implement test on deployment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing just to end off, and so apologize for any questions we weren't able to answer, but I want to add this little tidbit. There's an implication with everything you're saying here, which is you start small first.
Yes.
Yep.
Iteration. That's the key.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we manage so many tables with so few people is
Right.
start it small, build it in such a way that you can iterate on it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, that's it for today. Again, apologies for not answering all the questions, but I will really want to thank Robert and Jeff for this fun session of D3L2. We apologize for the cameras not actually zooming in properly for us today, but we'll figure that out next time around.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having us, Denny.
This was fun.
No, definitely. And so if you have any other questions, please don't forget to join the Delta user Slack. That's go.delta.io/Slack. Okay. Literally, I'll point you right there, and you can then go ahead and just ask us questions there too. We're usually there anyways. So that's about it. Again, thanks very much. Appreciate your time, and that's it for today, I guess.
If people have further questions, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. I assume you have us on here.
Yes, we do.
And
I'm a little more active on LinkedIn than Jeff, so probably.
All right, we'll talk about social media issues later. All right, well then that's it. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. Really appreciate it. Marissa and Carly, thank you very much, and Dustin, thank you very much for support.
Yes.
I think we can call it for a day now.
See you later.
Take care, everybody.